I am currently this session's MC. I am a graduate student at SCAD, and I'm a member of Toastmasters Hostess City. Today we will have 40 minutes for the panel discussion and 10 minutes for a Q&A session. And today's moderator is Holly Beilin.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly. I'm the editor-in-chief at Hypepotamus. We're a startup and technology-focused publication. I live in Atlanta, but we cover the whole Southeast, certainly including Savannah. Now, I want each of our panelists to go down the line and introduce yourselves, a little bit on your background, and then where you work now.
Hello. Okay, I'm Amanda Fox, and I see we have STEM in the house. Yeah, come on, you guys can be louder than that. There we go. So I'm a former teacher at the STEM Academy, and my background is in education. I am a creative director of STEAMPunksEdu in Louisville, Kentucky. I started an after-school program that focuses on education and a nonprofit that focuses on bringing STEAM to underserved areas in the community.
Hi, I'm Christine Wacta, and my background is I'm an architect, and right now I'm doing my PhD in advanced geospatial for urban design, history preservation, and architecture. So I teach at SCAD as well. I'm a professor of architecture, urban design, and I have recently created created with two other founders, Geogen, which is a geospatial generator, data generator. In a way, it's just basically a way of looking at data to actually generate more intelligent and resilient city. And if you've been here, you know, we've had two hurricanes in the last year or so. So understanding things so that we could actually be able to live a better life by avoiding them. Thank you.
And I'm Chris Nusbaum. I actually work for Gulfstream Aerospace. There's quite a few of you out there. I work in the Advanced Computing Technologies organization, and our focus is to help engineering, training, marketing, and sales with basically reaching out to the customer in a new way and helping with the design process to improve the way that we deal with building the aircraft. And we're doing that through augmented and virtual reality. As far as my background is concerned, I'm a computer engineer from the University of Cincinnati. And my master's degree is from Embry-Riddle University in systems engineering. I spent the first 7 years at Gulfstream doing lab tests, building flight simulators to help de-risk the flight test program. And the past 4 years I've been doing special software projects and eventually caught the eye of my boss. And so my primary focus in our group is working on VR flight simulator, which is actually over at the demo this afternoon. As well as augmented reality solutions for our engineering and sales and marketing folks.
So we have an educator, an architect, and an aerospace expert, and they're all using VR and AR. So I would love if you guys could give us a brief background on how you began using mixed realities in your field, and really how you use it as well.
I guess I have the micro. Well, as an architect and designer, I've been teaching for the last 10 years. I trained in France. I got my architectural degree, and I started working in architecture. So when I got here, I taught for 10 years and realized that really, you know, what we do as architects, we try to create cities, but yet, you know, we actually use city as testing site instead of actually creating it virtually in a way that we could experience it. You know, if you think about medicine actually have like testing, you know, where you test and understand how, you know, any medication, you know, work on a, you know, on a mouse, you know, before you actually test it on people. So to me, it was really necessary or urgent to start thinking about the city as a testing lab. You know, how could you actually, instead of just throwing the city at us human, and we have to mingle around it, I thought we were actually hurting ourselves by creating this urban design, you know, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. What do? You're stuck with it, you know. So we live hardly instead of living smartly. So we came to a point where, you know, I realized that, you know, the gaming industry It's basically creating game, so that people could actually be excited. And I think that the best way to actually bring people into understanding issue is to make them play, or be, into a game mind. So in a way, architects are actually dealing with the same thing, creating a city that has to apply with the social economic. And gaming is really kind of, that reality that is kind of imagined reality. So when you bring those two together, they're actually doing the same thing, except that we live in those cities. And if we could test it before we bring it in, into people's life, we'll have a better life, and we'll bring the invisible, or make the invisible visible in a way that actually make the city function even better. So the way I saw it was really thinking about, how, the game is kind of an imaginary way of thinking of the city. Yet the architect create a city that is real, a realistic city. Now the game is bringing that, how will I say, innovative idea, which for an architect could actually, which allow you to see the city as it was, as it is, and what it could be. And that could be, it's what the architect needed to be able to do. And that's really how, we start looking at the game, or, going toward the game, to look at, to be able to actually virtually test the city and create, those virtual environment, which somehow, looking at the environment will allow us to be able to understand things that we don't necessarily see, How do we create a city that allow us to see the invisible, or to bring those things, on?
So having spent most of my career at Gulfstream working on flight simulators, I was really, really excited when the original Oculus DK2 came out. So I convinced my boss to let me get one, and we went ahead and started doing some testing with VR flight sims. At the same time, we've got a piece of technology at Gulfstream called the Cave, and that's been going on for, I believe, about 5 or 6 years now. And for those of you who don't know what a cave is, imagine you're at a 3D movie, and instead of just having a screen in front of you, you also have screens on the sides and on the floor. So you can actually step into the 3D environment. But you're not wearing a VR headset, you're wearing just a pair of 3D glasses. So we use that right now to help with the sales process. So a customer comes in and says, hey, I want this veneer, this interior, these seats, and we can actually visualize that for them before they even sign paperwork. We also work with engineering to help them do design reviews in that environment as well. So since that was going on for a while, my boss inherited that group, and then I worked directly with him at the time. We kind of joined those two to do immersive realities. So we have both augmented and virtual in the same space.
Well, being in education, I'm a big nerd. And I love all things new tech, and I take it as my job to find these new technologies and find their educational value. So when augmented reality came out, Erasmus, I think, was the first app I started experimenting with. I had our students created a Holocaust memorial in the hallways of our school. And they went in and told virtual stories and narratives of either a victim or survivor. And parents came in and got to tour the hallways and experience that through the lens of their children. So that was one powerful way we were able to tell narratives of the past using augmented reality through, I guess, images. So everyone knows what augmented reality is, correct? Here at Geekend. So they would take images from the person's life, and that would be the trigger image, and they would have a overlay that they would put in that would link them to the digital world, and that was the videos that they created telling the stories. Since then, it's been a landslide of every tech tool that's come out. If it sticks, I roll with it. There's Samsung gear that I recently got because it runs ERVR, which is a simulation for, I guess, people who are going into the medical field. It's very, very interesting and didactic. And then there's CoSpaces.edu, which just came out in June of last year. I'm an ambassador for the company. We have had summer camps last year. We were the first to kind of beta roll it out, where students go in, they create 3D worlds, and they actually do coding inside with either Blockly, Visual JavaScript, or JavaScript. And one of the most powerful ways I've seen VR used is immersing students in the past. The Rosa Parks experiment, are you familiar with that? So there's a company that created basically in the headset, they sit on the bus that Rosa Parks was on, and they have augmented seats, and they get to hear and experience everything from her perspective of being told to go to the back of the bus. So I think it also lends a way for us to literally walk in other people's shoes. And then there's companies like SAIS, which is in Spain. They're dealing with PTSD, anxieties, and disorders. And we're trying to get that into school counseling. And then one of my current projects, I'm working with a colleague in New York and in LA. The Homeland Security actually started analyzing the data from school shootings. And there's no real good way to do trainings when school shootings happen. I'm from Kentucky. Well, I am now. I'm from Savannah. But we just had a shooting in Kentucky where 14 kids were wounded. Two were fatally shot. And there's just no way to prepare for something like that. So when you take data from the multiple shootings and you create a virtual training simulation for teachers and students, I think it's a great way to prepare them for the unprepared, something you just can't prepare for. So.
I think that, well, she talked about something that is very, very important, is that shooting. I mean, we all know here that you get out of your house in the morning, you're not sure that you're coming back, right? And as architects, we design places for people to be safe, And talking about the virtual reality and augmented reality, we have been, or I have been implementing in my classes and telling the student, well, you have to design a place now. We have some building codes, and augmented reality and virtual reality allow us to actually augment the code or add to it. Think about all of the building and all of the wasted spaces that we have. And we all have all of those tools now. We all connected, So why is it? I think that augmented reality and virtual reality are the key to the future, because we all have fun. If there's a shooting in a building, we could design a building so that we could actually tap to the way, like the safest way of getting out. And your phone could tell you there's a closet here that has how do you say, bulletproof. And you could get in until, the police come in. So we could design places. We have all of the tools to do that. And unless, those designer or the collaboration happen, we cannot save the life of people. So those things really help us actually, live a better life, live a safer life, because we have all of the tools. It's just a matter of connecting the dots, and this is really crucial.
Kind of follow on that. The really powerful thing about AR VR, especially for engineering, is to allow us to do prototyping early on, kind of like what she's talking about. It allows you to make mistakes early on. You don't have to go and build something and find out that you built it incorrectly. It allows you to prototype before you even draw anything up on paper. So I think that's a really important point that both of them brought up.
So don't kill me. I want to take one step back. Because we just covered a lot, and I think everyone is familiar with mixed reality in general, but can we define, first of all, the difference between AR and VR and what you need for each, and then we'll go into more how each serves different purposes. Chris, you want to start?
Sure. So our previous speaker kind of hit on this, but basically augmented reality is when you take digital information and bring it into the real world. You still have your peripheral vision. And virtual reality is when you take and transport the person into a digital environment completely. Mixed reality is when you start to take interaction with the real world in a virtual environment. So you kind of blend the two together. Anybody want to?
Okay, what do you see?
All your organs.
You see all my organs?
Your skeletal fracture.
I'm a big fan of puns. Yeah, so he scans the shirt and it augments a skeletal system. He can actually go in and dissect it. There's an instructor-led version as well that explains the digestive tract, the circulatory system, and you can break it down like that. In addition to, this is augmented, so this is linking to digital content. If we were to put it in here and hit the lens, and he were to view here, he's completely immersed in the environment. That would be virtual reality. So, if anyone wants to come up, and I'll stand, you guys can look at my organs. Just don't take any of them.
Cool. Anything else to add? Are we good? Okay. So you also touched, all of you, on the sort of psychological components that these technologies can bring out and how that helps each of your respective fields. So I thought you could touch on, again, how each of your industries, how VR and AR helps with behavioral science, with psychological components.
Yeah. And I think I like to talk about it just talking about stories. You know, if you think about it, you know, it's the visual as something that we all connected to. We could all actually rely, you know, look at the visual. Not everybody can read, you know. Go tell someone at the middle of, you know, Africa to read, you know, what's good for them, how to brush their teeth. If you show them a visual, they understand those. You know, we all connected to that. There's one thing very important that is happening in South Africa in April. Anyone know what's going on? They're running out of water. And that is not a fault of themselves, it's just that they didn't know. I think we live on the sidewalk. We live a life where we are totally blind, we hurt ourselves, get up, and we just live hard. With those tools, we are able to basically zoom into the future, be able to see all of the things and basically avoid them. I'm gonna give you a few examples. Think about, I think that we end up, you know, the way we have been, or how Phil have been doing a lot of changes for little impact. What do I mean by that? I mean that, you know, the architectural field does a lot, they change a lot, but it's only impact few people. All of the other fields do exactly the same because you have few people who are more interested in one than another. This is really calling up for this collaboration. We need to do a little bit to impact the whole world. It's mean that if we all come together and bring all of those skills together, we could impact more. So we ask just people to change, you know, just a little bit. The story in Malta, Italy. Malta, Italy had a problem of the population growing like crazy, and they are underwater. They were running out of water, and they didn't know actually how to figure it out because they have more people. You cannot tell people to stop coming to the city. They're going to come anyway. We know what's going on in the whole world. What they did, and they sat down at the city hall and brought all of the engineers, all types of life, you know, everyone, you know, in the city or the head of every different department, and they sat down and brainstormed and realized that as a city, they needed to make sure they look at the data and realize that people were using more water during the commercial, you know. So when the commercial happened, everybody is using water, so they run out of water. So what they did is they decided to actually use the city plot and break it into different sections where they had the water high on different, you know, on different area at different time. And what they told people was to, you know, they told people and they put sensor into everybody's house. And when you will go and open the water or you want to wash your clothes, it will tell you you'll pay $10 more. They have never had an issue. It has worked so well. So people have to just adjust a little bit to live a better life, and those information need to be brought up to them. So I think that, you know, it works a lot, but we need to know, you know, if you understand how to make your life better, you will actually do it because it's sometimes easier than to work to live harder. So it's really effective.
Chris, you work in sort of the sales and marketing side of things. How do you see VR and AR helping with that?
So kind of to jump off of where she was a little bit, VR in particular has really given us the ability to engage the customer even more than we did before. So before you would go through the whole sales process and you'd see swatches and you'd see little pieces of wood veneer. But now we can actually take that information and build a virtual version of their aircraft. And we can bring that to them and show them what their airplane's going to look like before we even cut any contracts, before they sign any paperwork. And that really excites the customer. They really, really enjoy that kind of personal feel of the whole idea. And on the engineering side, kind of to jump off the collaboration point, we have engineers, we have thousands of engineers, and you know, person A is working on this panel, person B is working on this panel, and typically you do that on a 2D screen. What VR in particular has done for us is it allows us to bring all of those people together to see the entire thing in one space, that they all can go, okay, I think there's a problem here, and they can have that collaboration and see it visually before we even build a prototype. So.
Yeah, what about in education? So how can this get students excited?
Well, not just students, but also educators. So I'm working with a middle school in Houston, and we're pitching a MedTech Maker program. It's a $150,000 program. It's got the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive. Now I'm looking at Oculus Go, if it'll come out. And when you're dealing with that amount of money, it's really hard to convince community businesses to fund it. There's a couple of different investor meetings you have to go through. And when you're talking about abstract ideas, people who are kind of out of touch with virtual reality and technology, and you take an application like CoSpaces and you build a mock-up of what the program looks like, and you have classrooms already built with all the technology that would be in it, that you can interact in. You can walk around the space and click on people, and the students will tell you what they're doing. Like, hey, I'm researching, virology through video game design, or I'm exploring the health benefits of virtual reality through the Verzoom bikes. Have you guys seen the bikes? So imagine, I hate running and I hate cycling, but when you combine that with games and gamification, and I'm actually like riding my bike, and the faster I pedal, the higher my helicopter goes so I can shoot the bad guys, I'm going to pedal faster because I have something that I'm trying to get done other than, calories burned. So imagine like a future PE lab with these Verzoom bikes. That's where I see, the future of education. We've got a gamer generation coming up, and I would rather cycle and, play games in gym class and help. And the other aspect about getting students excited, it's cutting edge technology, and students are already, they've got their phones in their pockets, and whenever we can reach them 24/7 on their native devices, we're going to have a greater engagement and breakthrough. So.
Another aspect that you all touched on is de-risking different things, right? So de-risking in an economic sense, you could test something before you actually make it. Public safety, can you each kind of touch on ways that this technology can help de-risk or make things safer in your respective fields?
De-risking, make things safer. Yes, I think that, if you think about it, I'm going to talk about, the urban design standpoint. Let's look at, how we have designed cities. We have urban designer, architect who design, and who have a dream, just like game engine or game professional. They have a dream, but now they're bounded by the economic, social, and all of those different things. And usually, they end up basically just designing and just testing on the side, I believe that if you have the data, if you actually start looking at the collaboration and allowing those things to be tested before you even put them in, you will have better design. Let me give you one of the, it's not going to be necessarily a risking, it's going to be like, how do you fail and how do you do successful business? I don't know if all of you know the Food Lion that was on MLK, right? It come in and closes, right? That's a lot of loss, and it could be, it could impact a lot, a business a lot. So I think that when you start looking at, how people could actually, even in the safety of the, like I said earlier, in the building, if there's a problem, you have all of those connecting to your phone and you know exactly where to run, or how to go. Think about the 9/11, where a lot of people were running back toward, the danger instead of running out. I think that those things could actually allow you, like those interconnected or those sensors could really much allow you to be safe, to be safer, or tell you where to go to hide, when there's a problem, Even in the health, health type of, hazard, you could actually be, safe or,
So I'm sure some of you already know this, but when you buy a 650, part of the sales process is picking out your paint scheme. So typically prior to the 650, what you would do is you would give them a 2D drawing of what your paint scheme would look like, and then they would go off, the paint folks would go off and tape off the airplane. You'd walk up to the airplane, you'd say, that looks about right, sign some paperwork, they'd go and paint it, and you just kind of hope that it worked. Sometimes that would cost millions of dollars of rework because this line wasn't the right size and things like that. Well, now what we do with the 650 and forward, we actually set up an array of projectors outside the whitetail aircraft. So the customer comes in and walks up to the actual airplane, and they project their paint scheme directly onto it. And we can make changes right then and there to say, okay, this line needs to be this much thicker, and they'll make those changes so they can see what their paint scheme is going to look like exactly beforehand, to kind of go off of what you were talking about. On the engineering side, I was mentioning flight sims earlier. So originally, you just went through a flight test program. There was no flight simulator. You just kind of built the aircraft and went through the flight test program and hoped everything went okay. Then we started to move forward, bring that design in-house, bring it further ahead, and we built flight simulators to simulate what the aircraft would do to de-risk flight test. Well, what we're trying to do with VR is take those multi-million-dollar flight simulators and de-risk the cost of them into something you can run on your desktop. So it's kind of just scaling back in the design process.
So, you get in a car wreck and you go to the hospital. Do you want an 8th grader operating on you? No. Guess what? They can in ER/VR. So, de-risk. Come on. In addition to that, there's body viz. Or is anyone, do I have any medical background people in here? No. So BodyViz is a company that actually uses scans and x-rays, and they create 3D models of skeletal systems, tumors, stuff like that. And med school students actually get to go in and analyze, hold a heart in their hand, kind of, who watches The Good Doctor? It's like that type of stuff, for real. So that technology is there. And in addition to that, there's Z-Space that allows them to dissect and go in and peel back the layers of the body. We're introducing this to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And the whole point is to introduce them to a technology that is a job of the future. And in the area in Houston that we're doing it in has a 94% poverty rate. Their graduation rate is 24%. So right now, their current programs are culinary and auto tech. So what we're trying to do is go in and give higher expectations, and bringing the technology to them is easier than creating a program directly with the hospitals, which we're also trying to do. And it excites the students and gives them alternative career pathways that they may not have thought of. So.
You mentioned at the beginning of that getting in a car accident, and I saw something a few weeks ago where I was just in a car accident actually on Tuesday. It was not my fault, but I promise. I saw something a few weeks ago where actually in high school when they teach driver's ed, they might be able to start with using simulators, which to me is for me would have been a public safety experience.
Even public speaking. I mean, how many of you guys, when you have to present on your big grand engineering challenges, don't want to get up and talk in front of your peers? Right. You can raise your hand. I was like that too. I was the introvert that sat in the back. I don't know what happened. But there's public speaking virtual reality apps where you can get up in front of a crowd. And so I think all of these simulations it takes the risk out of going into it for real the first time, and it prepares you and builds up your confidence. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, let me ask you guys a question. How much time do you think you spend inside your home or inside? 80% of our time, almost. And I think that, tapping back to the health, if you think about nature, nature is created perfectly. What does that mean? It means that things grow where they're supposed to grow. But today, we live in a world where, I have a bag that was made in China, and that has a zipper that was made in Africa, and it's traveled, and it's all great, it's fantastic. The problem is, even in our houses, we end up grabbing, or shipping things from different areas that were grown in that ecosystem, that work better in those ecosystems, and allow them to be used in a different world. There's nothing wrong with that, except that we never check how that react to the environment. It could be taking gas and making us, kind of killing us. And those are things that we don't know. Have you ever wondered why something, just start falling apart? It might be because it wasn't made for that environment. So AR, VR allow you to check all of those data and understand how suitable a material is for climate. And that really helps us also even for our health. We don't know the invisible. You don't know what's happened or what is, how old or what is coming out of those beams that are above us. We don't even know where they were made, So this is really a possibility, an opportunity to allow designer or professional to understand and to check against, because we live in a world now where the look good, kind of wins the feel good, and if we could teach or learn, how to actually understand what the material is and how it's, how it works best, we'll have better lives.
So I got really interested in their conversations and forgot the original question.
I think you answered the original question, then we went back on a
Okay,
tangent.
okay.
But keep the mic, because I'm going to start you with another question.
All right, good.
I was wondering about the challenges that you each still experience in your field with VR and AR. So where is the tech not yet at, or where is it still where are there still some pain points that you think could be solved?
So there was a demo before this of the HoloLens, and the big pain point for that is the field of view. It's really, really narrow, so trying to get people to adopt that type of technology, you have to get them prepared for what they're about to see before they actually put it on. It's not as straightforward as VR, where you just put it on their face and it's like, I understand why this is so amazing. So there's a little bit of a barrier to entry on that. Because our customers are extremely wealthy individuals, they care a lot about how they look. So sometimes we have issues where we'll go to an event and people have very special hair and they don't want to put on a headset. That actually is starting to break down. Once you get one person involved and they start to show that there's excitement around the technology, then you'll start to get those other people to kind of follow through. We've seen that quite a bit. So I think that really it's just finding the right people inside your company or outside, hiring new people, like a couple of our previous speakers here, who understand the technology, understand game engines. Game engines are totally new for us. It's not something we really ventured out into. We're very much used to traditional engineering CAD data and traditional software types. So trying to get that expertise in-house is a big issue for us.
What about cost? Is this cost prohibitive at all? Anyone can take that.
Yes. So education funding cuts, it's very cost prohibitive. So when you have platforms like CoSpaces.edu, which are made for education, it's like $3.50 a student, which is still a barrier for a lot of teachers. I mean, $3.50 a student, and teachers can't cover that. So there's awesome platforms like Donors Choose, where teachers can put projects up and get their classroom funded for the technology that they need. But when you look at an Oculus, which is like a $400 price point right now, you still need at least a 1070 GTX card, which you're looking at about $1,200 laptop, or $1,200 to $3,000, depending on how high you want to go. And it's just not feasible, which is why I'm looking forward to the standalone devices. The Oculus Go, I think, is priced at $200 for the 32 gig, and that's probably an entry-level price point for education, but you're not going to get the complete immersive tracking that you're going to get with the sensors, with the HTC or the Oculus. So you're sacrificing some of the quality. Going back to your other question, one of the barriers is also quality of virtual reality applications that education is flooding the market with VR. There's Google Expeditions, there's Nearpod, there's Eon, which is new. There's Lifelike, which is more AR. But there's just so many different consumption apps. And we've got to keep in mind that our students don't need to be consuming media all day. They need to be making their own. And having co-spaces and putting them in there and having it's just so intuitive and easy for kids. I've taught 1st grade to 8th grade with it. That's the spectrum that you have to work with these kids. And then pushing them into other programs that are industry standard, like Unity or Unreal Engine. So it's just exposing to that and then pushing them.
What about quality of education in those? I mean, are those all created by educators, or some of them are more just fun, I would imagine?
A lot of them are created by educators. A lot of educators are passionate about VR, so they become ambassadors of these tech companies, and they get in and they give feedback, and then they kind of get shafted in the end, don't you think? Because then the prices go up, and the ambassadors are no longer ambassadors, and now we're scrounging to come up with like $1,000 to be able to use what we were using and that we gave the feedback for and informed. But I mean, it's all about the big dollar, right?
Christine, what are the applications in urban planning, or the challenges,
Well,
rather?
I think, yeah, the challenges are, I have to classify them in 2 different ways. The price is the first one. And like he said earlier, it's, like the exposure. A lot of people really don't understand. And it's really something new also, that we have. So urban planning has been set a certain way. And it's a field that has been there for so many years. And it's hard, especially for the people today, to understand those whole new tools, So you have a whole set of people who are working one specific way, and it's hard. And the curve is really high, And one of the things that is usually unfortunate in those cases is the fact that you're talking to an audience that doesn't understand. And data is so powerful and also overwhelming. Not every data is good data. In urban planning, you deal with real people, real life, real stuff. You cannot just bring any data and throw them at them, because you could do it wrong, So, and I think being able to understand those things is really something that requires an education, and a depth that a lot of people don't have, So throwing all of those data, you could do it wrong every day, all day long. You need to understand where the data comes from. Not every data is a real data. So it touches really what we do at the heart. You cannot just make mistakes, and just grab anything and start working with it. Let me tell you about like the crime. If you think about it, of course in Savannah, let's talk about crime. There are areas that are crime-based. And I have this assignment with my student where I send them out and say, I want you to fill the area. And the reason I do that is because I want to make sure that they realize that we oftentimes make decisions about city, about people, but we make them based on our feelings. And we need to, feelings are great, but feelings are not the way to determine how people's life will be. So I send them out through Savannah and I say, you take a pad, I give them a nap, and I say, you just basically collect your feeling on an area and write them down where you felt scared, walk faster, and they make maps, they make mental mapping and, actually GS mapping about that area. Then when they come back to class, I give them data about those areas, and they realize that where they live is where there's most crime. So the area they were afraid of are the areas that are the safest. Why is that? It's because we go on in life feeling or hearing what people say and thinking that's reality. So it's really, really hard to make people actually believe, because we tend to believe what we hear rather than what the data is. We tend to be very slow at checking the fact. And we usually basically just look at what people are saying, and if someone walks that way, then I'm going to follow. We are just cowards. We just follow people. And we need to stop that and start looking at, what is it, what has happened here for the last few years, so that we could understand better designer. So that's really the trick.
I guess to expand a little bit on what they said earlier, part of the adoption problem is that VR and AR in particular are things you have to experience. You don't really start to understand what it is until you've actually put the device on and have seen what a VR experience is really like. And so a lot of this, and we've mentioned several times Unity and Unreal, a lot of this is tied to the video game industry. When you're trying to create a business and produce something in this space, it's hard to get people to take you seriously because it's associated with video games. So you kind of have to break that barrier down initially.
Facebook. Facebook has Facebook Spaces. It is awesome for education. So I can go into VR with my Oculus, and I can take 360 like orbs, like spheres, and I can just create a deck. And if I wanted to do a talk about geography or historic locations or life science, and I'm looking at rocks. What was your rock's name? Thoshi. Tillman? What was it? So I can take these spheres, I can pick them up with my controllers, and I can drop them onto my deck, and my whole 360 environment changes. So I did a Facebook Live. I just blasted it out to my timeline, and I went to Australia, I went to Paris, and I went to Dubai. All three places that I've keynoted at, actually, on education. So I was just kind of showing students like what this area was like and talking about my experience there.
And if you have a question for a speaker specifically, you just direct it towards them.
All right, so I have like a question for each one of you. Education, Amanda, how has VR AR helped with learning disabilities? And for Christine, I know that Revit and CAD can be like exact details for presentations. Do you guys go into like in depth and details in your VR AR? And for Chris. Oh, sorry. I just had them all piled up.
I'm gonna think about this for a second. I don't have any real data except for observational and what parents have told me.
Okay.
So let me think, and I'm.
For Christine.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so for Revit and CAD, I know you can get down to the exact detail of your layout. For VR, how do you guys actually get in depth for someone to walk through and say, you need this amount of material or anything like that?
I'm going to add to that, and I just came back from California from the Geodesign Summit, which just last year, and I'm really, really happy to announce this because 5 years ago I started my PhD because I saw a gap between CAD, Revit, and the GIS. Because in fact, we are here designing for the people, we're designing in life, yet CAD and Revit do not have, they're not geolocated. How could you create or calculate sun on a building when you're not even geolocated, when you don't even know where that building is, And that's what we've been doing for so long. And just 2 months ago, Autodesk and GIS just actually came together as collaboration where you could actually link both together. VR does, because we're using GIS data and using geolocation, it allows us to see exactly real time and be able to calculate the sun so accurately that you could go to the city hall and say, well, you cannot just put a solar panel here. This is the area of the building that get the most sun during the day. You could calculate those things and it put it to a whole new level. It's accuracy, it's reality. It's not, think about the building before, we overbuild them because we put so much structure. With those things, we could actually be able to test and say you only need this much strength. Think about, and I always tell my students, going back to doctor, when I walk into class, I ask them, how many of you have, know someone or doctor, surgeon, and a lot of them will put their hands up. And I say, will you let them open your brain without an x-ray? They all say no. I say, why do you let architects design without having, using those tools to actually check the ground, the water runoff, understand it? Because we have all of those data and all of those tools, they're just not connected. And they all look at me, they say, wow. I say, yes, they are invisible down there that, unless we actually use those tools of GIS, and use the virtual reality, we cannot understand what's going on. How many times have you started digging and saying, oops, I didn't realize this was here, And even placing the building in the best area so that the water runoff is better. With Geogen, just talking about that, we did some work for Chicago, the city of Chicago, and what I like about the VR AI is that it allows us, I'm not there as a teacher. I'm there as someone who unveil a lot of things and allow people to come back and use it their own way. And that makes us even bigger. So with the city of Chicago, we work on the 3D of Chicago, and when we talk to the city, they realize that, because we could give them the pervious area, area that, get water down faster. Think about the flood, what the city did, and they created, they said they were going to create a tax where they're taxing people, a lot that have less pervious, a little more. what this does and tax other people less. So that makes you realize that, if my lot is going to be pushing water on someone else's lot, it's not sustainable. It's not only educational, it also makes people realize that, sea level rise is real, so it's really kind of broad. It's go out of, it actually goes out of the, how will I say, the limit of the classroom and get into educating, even the public.
So before you ask your question, on the first one, look into Clemson University. They have an entire program based on VR in medical industry. I haven't actually read the latest papers that they published, but they cover some of the things you're talking about. So what was your question?
So I noticed you really focus on your customers' needs. I was just curious if you guys have a UX team that works with your engineers.
Like,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, they're sitting right behind you.
Well, then I'll talk to them. Thanks.
Now? Yes. Okay, so looking at learning disabilities and just the way students are kind of evolving, the way we're evolving as humans, we are more fast-paced. We like to have control of what we're learning and our content all the time. So I think integrating virtual reality or augmented reality into the classroom puts the learner in control. It has them go through modules at their own pace, and it keeps them engaged. Those with ADHD or attention deficit disorder, they are, the world kind of, when you're doing VR, the world kind of fades away because you are in your headset, and the distractions just kind of melt away. You're more focused on what's going on. I've had students in I have a makerspace in Kentucky that I put together, and we've got the Oculus in the back, and man, I have to rotate the kids out on 30 minutes, It's like their reward now because they want to get in there and they want to do tilt brush, they want to paint creations, they want to play Rec Room, which I don't like it's when they go in and you can actually talk to people from all over the world. So there's an appeal there because you can be in the same room with someone. I played cards or holograms against humanity with someone from Ireland and Scotland the other day, and I won 7 trophies. So that tells you anything about my mind. But I will pass it off now.
Thank you.
So next up we have lunch in the back here, also at 8-Bit Donuts, and at the Jolly Goblin, the Geekend AR VR showcase is starting, so feel free to check those out. Thank you.